much for such an engaging day. I've so enjoyed going around and listening to the presentations and just the rich conversations that we've been having. It's been also lovely, I think, to speak and to see the sharing of practice between our FE colleagues and our HE colleagues as well. So, you know, a big thank you to Anshul, Nick and the team for putting on such a great day. It's been a real privilege. And I'm also very grateful for you coming back on a Friday afternoon and still being here. So thank you so much for this last session and for joining me. As I've said this morning, there is, you know, we're all here because we care about the student experience, and the work we're doing at a curriculum level is crucial really to the success of our students. But equally at Jisc, we recognise, you know, that despite us saying a lot of this for the past good 20 odd years and longer, we really needed to engage our senior leaderships across the UK HE further with digital. They absolutely realised when COVID hit, many institutions, just how unprepared universities were for really truly embracing digital. It's a very different story at Staffs because I'm aware of the journey you've been on for many, many years around digital. But certainly for many institutions, it was a real wake-up call for their senior leaders. So the work we've been doing at Jisc has been trying to engage not just our conversations that we've been having today, but when we're talking about some of the challenges relating to staff time, capability, resourcing, spaces, timetabling, those are all issues that also have to be escalated up. And we need to be engaging our senior leaders in that discussion and in that debate if we really are going to achieve digital transformation, if we ever can. Just the conversation I was having a minute ago, and we were hearing from John Hendry earlier, the rate of pace of acceleration of change in technology, particularly when it comes to the AI tools that are being generated. So, you know, when we talk about digital transformation, it's not something that we can perhaps ever achieve. We're always on that journey, we're always iterating. So what I'd like to do in this sort of closing keynote is sort of leave you with, again, some questions to pose, some things to think about in relation to where you sit within the wider organisation and the sorts of things that we need to be considering at that institutional level in order to make what you do achievable and in order to have that impact on the student experience. Now, thank you so much for engaging in the previous activity this morning. It was lovely just to see the word clouds. I have tweeted the word cloud, and I know that there's also some great things that you're taking away. But what I thought we'd like to do now, in a bit of sort of light entertainment, is just on your tables. You don't necessarily have to draw. I was in Anshul's session earlier around the Lego play, and in some ways I wish we had the Lego on the table now because we could do a great activity around this. But I'd really just like you to share on your tables, what does digital transformation mean to you in your context? What does that look like in your practice? What does that mean in terms of the ways that you're teaching your students? If you are creative, because I know, having spoken to some of you today, there's lots of creative talent in the room, you know, almost thinking about, if you want to draw, you can, but if not, just share some thoughts. We've used this activity before, and we've said, well, what kind of animal would it look like? Or what kind of car would it be? So just to use those metaphors, and just on your groups on your tables, if you aren't with anyone on a table, just join a table and introduce yourself. I'm just going to give you about 5 minutes just to talk through, and I'm going to perhaps come around the different tables. For those of you online, it would be great if you could also engage in this activity. If you're online at home, you might have access to some paper and you want to draw a little sketch, and then you can upload your image and share it back with us on the Padlet that I've set up. So either text in the chat online, or if you do want to share an image. Brilliant. Wow, what a creative room. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of that on the Padlet later. Thank you so much. And I think, you know, what that's showing is, and what our sort of definition of digital transformation that we've been using very much focuses around culture, around workforce development. Technology is in there, but it's not the whole emphasis of of what we're talking about here. We want to enable new and innovative ways of doing things, but it's not just transformation for transformation's sake. We really need to be thinking through the pedagogical values that we were speaking about earlier. So for us at Jisc, we have been, although Jisc is often associated with that bottom circle around the technical infrastructure, yes, we absolutely need to ensure that we have got that infrastructure in place, that we have got the secure, the robust, the reliable systems, platforms that can enable us to build up those effective and efficient processes that can enable us to really deliver that world-class learning experience for our students. But at the top there, and most importantly, we have to bring staff and students along with us and really show the values and the potential of what digital offers, as well as the areas where perhaps it's not, always the only way that we have to be doing things. So digital transformation is really the impact on all of those different key aspects in our organisation. So thinking through the work we've been doing with universities over the past year and post-pandemic, we have sort of put together various guides, various reports around this, and there are some common themes that are coming through in thinking about digital transformation in a university or a college. And some of these sort of key questions are some of the questions that come back to us in terms of, can you help us do X, Y, and Z? Can you help us write your digital strategy for us? No, it has to be owned. It has to be led by the university with a senior leadership team, with a board of governors, to really invest and have that ownership. But some of the sort of the key areas is, yes, we need the infrastructure, we need the technology, we need the platforms to enable what we need to do. And today we've been talking very much around learning and teaching, but we also need to be considering this in relation to research as well. And the ways in which digital is really enhancing and accelerating research in many areas. Leadership for digital is key. I have tweeted today a podcast we did with Raheel Nawaz around the digital transformation vision for Staffordshire. And we're interviewing several other sort of senior leaders to give their vision of what digital transformation looks like at their institution. There are some common threads, but it is about engagement. It is about working with, it's about supporting staff in using it effectively. How do we support staff and students with the development of digital skills and capabilities and confidence? And I know that that's a theme that's sort of run throughout today. And again, I know that there's a lot of work going on at Staffordshire where you are using various different tools and various different frameworks to support understanding around what digital capability means. It's not just about us being able to use PowerPoint or ChatGPT, it's all those other sort of critical thinking skills, information literacy, data literacy, just so important for us in our day-to-day work. But we focused on curriculum design and learning design and assessment, and that's really crucial in thinking about our transformation and what learning will look like. But also underpinning all of that, and it's the last bullet point because I think it's one of the most challenging, relates to data and how we can actually join up all our systems and make them interoperable and make the data more shareable between those systems to enable that efficiency of processes and business processes around that. And that really is one of the, I think, the most challenging areas for many universities and colleges as well. So we have put together a report where we interviewed universities around the country around how their senior leaders were developing their digital strategies. And within that report, there's some really nice examples of different approaches that institutions are taking. Some are saying, actually, we've been doing this for 10 years. Our digital strategy is so embedded, it's absolutely part of every strategy within the organisation. Some are saying, well, actually, we're just starting out. And for us to have a digital strategy, we have to have that in order for us to get digital on the senior leadership table and to secure the investment that we need. So recognising that everyone is at such a different part on this journey. So one of the things that has come back, and again, similar to what we were talking about this morning with blended learning, and as we were seeing going around the room today, everyone has a different interpretation of digital transformation. And in Jisc, historically, Jisc had sort of a large area of work primarily associated with the technical infrastructure, the back end that actually, we all need, we all rely on, and it just works seamlessly. And hence digital transformation often sat within IT, within the Chief Information Officer's areas. And of course, that brings one perspective. But then we also need to be thinking about the estates, HR, learning and teaching, research, and recognizing that actually we need to be looking across our organisation and really have that broader understanding. So again, with consultation with the community, with many different organisations, going from Advanced HE, QAA, UCISA, AUA, ORD, I'm sure I've forgotten some, UUK. We have been working with the community to try and bring together what we say is a shared understanding around digital transformation, just so that we can actually say, no, it's not just about the IT. No, it's not just about research, or it's not just about learning and teaching. We need all those senior leaders in the room to have that shared understanding and to break down some of the silos that exist within institutions. So the framework has been, again, a way of articulating what underpins digital transformation across all of those different areas. From the infrastructure, which you'll see there as that grey inner circle that absolutely everything hangs off and relies on, but also, importantly, organisational digital culture. And that really is absolutely key in terms of being able to then drive forward that digital transformation agenda. We really do need to be thinking about digital culture, digital mindset, the ways in which we have our organisational identity in the digital world, thinking about our well-being. And I loved that the comments about actually sometimes we just need to detox. We just need to actually leave the digital behind and have that recognise that we need to be thinking about our digital well-being as an organisation, as a culture. In the centre, you'll see we've got the key 4 areas of activity, and I'll say a little bit more about those in a moment. But those are really the key function areas of a university in relation to curriculum development, in relation to research, in relation to the way that we manage our information and our knowledge and our data, and the way that we are interacting across the university, but also with our communities. And particularly, I think today, the conversations I've been having about the links that you have with schools, with colleges, and how we have to ensure we are having that regular communication and transfer of learning. So it's been a helpful way of really starting to position this as a whole organisational approach and starting to engage senior leaders to think about it's not just investing in the kit, it's also investing in people. And we really do need to be thinking more about the support that we give our staff if we are looking at driving forward all the change within these different areas. And it is a hugely complex and fragmented approach that we're trying to pull together. And no one has achieved it as yet, because we never will, as I said earlier, we're on that journey. But it has just given us a way of being able to have conversations with senior leaders around this agenda. In each of those areas, we go down into a lot more detail in the framework, and you can have a look at that document at your leisure. Bit of bedtime reading, it is quite detailed, but one Vice Chancellor said to me the other week, actually, if our senior leaders don't engage with this, we shouldn't be in those positions, because digital transformation and digital is not simple. It is complex. We do need to be having that real understanding about the areas that we need to be working on. So for us, it was important for us to really focus in, as this was a model for education. We really wanted to ensure that we were focusing down on the uniqueness of our education environment. There are many different models of digital transformation, a lot out there in the commercial sector, a lot out there internationally as well. And we felt that all the aspects included in those other business focus models, in terms of focus on strategy, leadership, investment, technical aspects, are all included in our framework, but it's more nuanced around what we need to really drive forward change in an educational environment. So really important for us, again, to shift that purely technical business focus onto culture and onto people. So just to give you a little flavour of what the framework looks like, if we were to sort of delve down into the document, we are talking about curriculum development that has been a theme of today. We are sort of indicating some broad activities within there that should be considered at an organisational level, and then some examples of activities that could be done. And that's broken down into all the different sections of the framework. So it is trying to, again, put forward statements of what could be good practice within an organisation, and then thinking about ways in which you might be able to work towards that or have already achieved that. We are very aware that there is a wider spectrum of where institutions are with their journey around digital transformation. And, you know, the sort of the flow chart, the flow diagram at the top of that slide just is a way of trying to visualize the processes around what we need to be doing. And you'll recognize in there that it's no different to, you know, the ways in which we're designing our curriculum. It is about articulating our vision, what we're trying to achieve. It's identifying our priorities. It's about reviewing where we're at and doing our baselining. And it's about looking at ways in which we can take forward those implementation plans and then evaluate and regularly evaluate. When we're talking to institutions about developing their strategies in these areas, it's not just we're going to develop a strategy and have a document that sits on a shelf and we can tick that box. It is about constantly going back, reviewing and looking at how we are making that progress. So at Jisc, we want to be able to support institutions on this with this process as well. And we have got some guidance that we are developing, some models of good practice, some case studies, some member stories, and really delighted, you know, to be collecting that to enable that sharing of practice, to see what others are doing, and to really have that rich engagement across the sectors around how we're taking this forward. So the challenge that we would then set, having developed a framework, was to then say, right, well, how do we self-assess where we are with our digital maturity? And if you consider how complex the landscape is within an institution, the way in which digital is threaded throughout every process, that was a vast challenge for us to try and come up with a way in which we could then work with institutions to do this. This is still work in progress. We have a maturity model that we're going to pilot from September with institutions to look at ways in which we can then think about where do we sit, where are we with our digital maturity, and what are the priorities that we need to be taking forward, and that would differ across the sector. So it's a way of trying to establish a bit of organisational baselining. It's when we have conversations with universities, we often say, well, what's the evidence? What have you got to know how your students and staff are using technology or their experiences of the environment? And often it's all anecdotal. There isn't necessarily that body of evidence. You know, we always say, if you're doing a project or if you're doing any research, you've got to really evaluate it, show, you know, how you've achieved your goals. But of course, when it comes to these sort of areas, although we're sort of preaching that, it's not necessarily always seen in practice. And we need to be setting up those structures in order to be able to gather that evidence base. But it's also, as we say, you know, looking at where you are as an institution. Everyone will be thinking and defining different priorities depending on your particular area of and what your goals are for your institution. So as we've said with the framework, there are many different maturity models out there. And I've just put some of these up because some of you may be interested in just looking at some of the other work that's going on outside of education, particularly thinking more of the business sense. We know there's some very well established models there around digitalization and some of the work that Gartner, Deloitte are doing on more business end of the spectrum. There's also a model that's been developed purely for sort of enterprise architecture approach, which is called the HERM model. It's quite well established in many UK universities. And then at Jisc as well, for those of you that are interested, we've also developed a model for FE. We've got a digital innovation tool that's freely available for colleges to use to think about their levels of maturity across the areas that we've just been discussing. But there's also a really nice model there that's evolving around AI maturity of practice. So if anyone's interested in having a little bit more detail around that, and you'll see in all those, the terms that are being used, it's not ever reaching that end goal. It's all about, you know, we are perhaps experimenting, we're exploring, we're looking at ways in which we can embed, and of course it will be continually moving. And of course we developed a model quite a few years ago now around organisational digital capability, which again has fed into the developments that we're now doing. So there is something there, and even, you know, going back to those questions I had at the start of the presentation around infrastructure, data, curriculum, staff skills, it's thinking about ways in which we can assess our levels of digital maturity through the benchmarking or the baselining, but highlighting opportunities that we can take forward and how we can move forward on those. If we don't have the evidence, it's harder to make the case, it's harder to get investment, and we need to be thinking strategically, particularly with the constraints that we all are facing on our resources at the moment. But also to really encourage that collaboration, to have conversations between colleagues in different areas of the university, because we're all working towards that sort of shared goal. So in terms of sort of progressing to digital maturity, you know, there's some sort of key points there that we've sort of picked up in our conversations with institutions over the past year. Just to say, we've been working with a group of over 200 senior leaders across the UK, but also internationally, who've been feeding into this work and showing again the levels of interest. I don't think we would have necessarily had all of that engagement pre-pandemic. So from vice chancellors, PVCs, CIOs, directors of library, a whole range of different interactions that we're now seeing, all of which obviously digital is core to their roles that they're taking forward. So we need our leaders to really have that strategic vision. We also need that collaboration to happen, not just within our institution, but across the sector. And, you know, the more we can collaborate, the more we can learn from each other, the more we're able to accelerate our journey forward. We know there's a huge amount still of legacy systems in our institutions, and, you know, those are not necessarily easy and quick fixes. It requires investment, it requires a whole range of sort of business change processes around there. And of course, that's really linked into mitigating the risks, particularly if we're talking about cyber, if we're talking about data. We have to actually ensure we've got all of that built in. But of course, underpinning that is engagement. And, you know, we started off the day talking about student engagement, but it's, you know, absolutely true in this stage as well. Exeter University, for example, has used their student ambassadors to create a range of TikTok videos around their digital strategy. What does it mean for students? And, you know, innovative ways in which you can just get that out there. The activity that we did just now around, you know, what does digital mean to you? Taking that out, looking at ways in which you can sort of draw those conversations back in and getting that engagement and thinking it back to the individual. How does this relate to you in your context and in your journey? So just really finishing off with a final slide. I can get the, oops, I think we've gone too far now. Let's go back. Just to say, we have, as I said, established this working group for digital transformation. If anyone is interested in joining that group, please do scan the QR code. It will take you to a form to fill in, and it just means you're part of the community and you'll get access to the materials as we're developing them, but also to opportunities to really network and share the learning that's taking place. We have been, and we were really delighted that Staffordshire hosted our first event in this series, but we've been hosting and working with universities to develop some events called Demonstrating Digital Transformation. The first one was held in your fantastic Health Innovation Centre. Real privilege to see the work that's going on around immersive learning and all the other technologies that they're using. And that was an opportunity to showcase that work to colleagues from across the UK, FE and HE. And we've run 3 other events. We've got our last one next week at the University of Greenwich. We'll be running another programme post-summer with physical events with other universities, but also having an online webinar series whereby we can invite in people to share the examples of practice from their institutions, and also bringing in some colleagues from internationally to share their work as well. So we're also, as part of that, we're able to record a podcast from the university, and you'll see your first one was from Staffordshire University. I've got the bit.ly link there if you haven't seen it already, and 2 podcasts with Mike Phillips and Raheel Nawaz, which was great to hear. Again, voices from the sector talking about digital transformation in a particular context. So keep an eye on that as well. There's going to be a few more planned over the next year. Now, international students has come up, and I mentioned it very briefly, and we had a brilliant presentation from Ali earlier today as well around the work that's going on at Staffordshire. We feel quite passionately that this is an under-researched area. More and more international students are coming into the UK to study, and as we've said, having very different expectations and experiences. So we've, on our second phase of research that we're just writing up at the moment, which is focus groups with international students, a variety of different locations across the UK. And if we can get digital right for international students, we can get it right for our home students as well. So if anyone's interested in joining our working group for that, just again, be kept informed of the learning, the research that's coming out. Do get in touch with me or scan the QR code. Thank you so much for being such a fabulous audience today. It's been great just to hear the interaction and the discussions that have been going on, but more importantly, to really hear the exemplary work that you're all doing, whether it be in your colleges, whether it being in the university. And just a real thank you for listening and staying on Friday afternoon. And thank you to Angela and Nick for the invitations of joining me today. Thank you.